My name is Claire Whitmore. I'm 35 and I never thought I'd have to protect my grandmother's legacy from the people who raised me. When Grandma Evelyn passed, she left me the Ashford estate, $1 million investment portfolio, and generations worth of heirlooms. At our family meeting last week, my parents calmly announced they'd be using it all to pay off my brother Jared's gambling debts. What they didn't know was that I'd already moved everything into an irrevocable trust they couldn't touch. Their reaction when I told them absolutely worth it. Before I dive into how it all unfolded, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to, it was a Tuesday afternoon in downtown Seattle. The kind of gray-blue day where rain seemed to hang in the air without ever falling. Claire Whitmore had just wrapped up a retirement consultation with a longtime client and was preparing notes when her phone buzzed with a text. Family meeting this Saturday, 3:00 p.m. at the house. Important matters to discuss. No greeting, no context. Just another line from the script Elaine Whitmore had always directed. Sharp, clipped, and utterly devoid of warmth. Claire read it twice, her fingers tightening around the phone. There were no question marks in that message, only expectation, a summons, and a familiar weight pressing into her chest, not from the text itself, but from the decades of history it echoed. She didn't have to ask what this was about. Her mother's family meetings were rarely about family. They were about Jared. Her younger brother had a way of falling into crisis like most people tripped over curbs. Predictable, avoidable, but somehow always someone else's fault. And when Jared fell, it was Claire who was expected to show up with the net, back in her office. Julia leaned on the doorframe with that knowing look. They'd been best friends since business school, and now ran the Whitmore Hale Financial Group together. If anyone could read Claire without words, it was her. "Let me guess," Julia said, arching an eyebrow. Another Jared situation. Claire held up her phone. "Apparently we're back to coded messages." "No bet," Julia said dryly. "Is it another failed startup? Surprise baby? Or IRS letter this time?" Claire gave a tired laugh, though her stomach had begun its slow, familiar knot. "No idea. But I've got a sinking feeling it's not just about him." Julia's expression sharpened. "This wouldn't have anything to do with your grandmother's estate, would it?" And that's when it truly hit her. It had been 18 months since Grandma Evelyn passed. 18 months since the one person in the family who never made Claire feel like second place had left this world. The woman who had taught her about self-worth, financial independence, and the quiet strength of holding your ground. And now, with final distributions from the estate scheduled for next month, Claire was being called home without explanation. The timing wasn't just suspicious, it was precise. She thought of Evelyn's home in Ashford, Oregon, a white colonial with wraparound porches and the scent of old pine and lemon polish. Of the portfolio Evelyn had built herself, long before anyone in the family took Claire's financial acumen seriously. Of the heirloom emerald necklace that had been passed down through generations of Whitmore women. None of it had ever been about wealth for Claire. It was about meaning and legacy, and the only person who'd ever taught her the difference between having value and being valued. Now, with a single text, the familiar machinery of the Whitmore family had started turning again, and she already knew where she fit in, not as a beneficiary, but as the cleanup crew. Claire slid the phone into her bag, her expression unreadable but her thoughts already racing. They were planning something, and this time, she intended to be ready. Claire had always understood her role in the Whitmore household. From the time she was old enough to tie her own shoes, she was expected to be the one who didn't ask for much, didn't cause problems, didn't need saving, while other kids brought home crayon drawings for the fridge. Claire brought home perfect report cards that got quietly filed away in drawers. A nod from her father. A distracted good job from her mother. That was the extent of her applause. Meanwhile, when Jared managed to pass algebra with a C-, there were balloons on the breakfast table. "He tries so hard," Elaine would say, with pride in her voice that Claire never heard directed at her. "You don't need the attention," her mother once told her. "You're strong. You're capable. Jared needs a little extra." That little extra turned into a lifetime of allowances, a parade of tutors, coaches, and bailouts. Jared failed upward, every stumble framed as a growing pain, every disaster softened by the word potential. And Claire. She kept her head down, her grades high, and her emotions tucked away where no one had to deal with them. But one person saw her. Grandma Evelyn, Evelyn Whitmore, Claire's paternal grandmother, was not the kind of woman who made her presence known with noise. She didn't interrupt, didn't lecture, didn't try to fix you. She simply noticed. And from the moment Claire was old enough to sit beside her at the kitchen table and watch her balance a checkbook, Evelyn had noticed everything. "You've got a mind for numbers," she said one afternoon, placing a pencil in Claire's small hand. "Not just talent, discipline, that's rarer than people think." On weekends, when Jared was off at soccer camp or being taken to the movies by their parents, Claire spent quiet afternoons in Evelyn's home office, learning how to read financial statements, understand compound interest, and track market trends. At 12, Claire knew how to read a quarterly report. By 16, with Evelyn's guidance, she had opened her first investment account, funded entirely with money she'd earned tutoring other kids. Evelyn didn't just teach her about money, she taught her about control, about choosing what kind of woman you wanted to be in a world that often mistook silence for weakness. "Financial independence is freedom," she'd say, pushing a glass of iced tea across the table. "If you can take care of yourself, you'll never have to beg anyone to value you." Those lessons sank deeper than Claire could have understood at the time. They became the foundation of everything she built: her degree from Stanford, her MBA, her CFP certification, the boutique firm she co-founded with Julia. She hadn't just survived the family dynamic, she'd quietly grown beyond it. Meanwhile, Jared drifted through 3 different colleges, none of which he finished. There was always an excuse. He's still figuring things out. The environment wasn't right. The professors didn't support his creativity. After the failed degrees came failed ventures: a luxury sneaker business that collapsed in debt, a crypto app that never launched, a food truck that burned through $80,000 and never served a single meal. With each collapse came another family meeting, another rescue plan, and another reminder from their father. "Thomas, that's what families do. We lift each other." But they didn't mean everyone. They meant Jared and Claire. She was always expected to be the one doing the lifting. The irony wasn't lost on her. The very child who needed nothing was expected to give everything, and the one who gave nothing was protected at all costs. Still, Claire never confronted them. Not directly. She buried herself in her work, built her own wealth, and cultivated a quiet dignity they couldn't take credit for. The kind Grandma Evelyn would have recognized. When Evelyn became ill, it was Claire who moved her into her guest room. She coordinated appointments, managed medications, handled late-night calls. Jared showed up twice. Both times, he asked Evelyn for money. Claire never forgot the way her grandmother's hand squeezed hers during one of their last lucid conversations. "You see the whole board," she whispered. "Not just the pieces in front of you. They'll never understand that. But I do. Now." As she sat alone in her office with that text message still glowing on her phone screen, Claire felt her grandmother's voice echo in the silence. "You were never invisible. You were never second best. You were simply surrounded by people too small to see the size of your strength." And they were about to learn exactly how much they had underestimated her. The morning after that message from her mother, Claire sat across from Julia at their usual cafe, an airy corner spot near Pike Place Market, where they often debriefed after long weeks of client meetings. Rain tapped softly against the windows, but Claire barely noticed. She was too wrapped in thought. Julia stirred her coffee, then leaned in. "I didn't want to bring this up until I was sure, but I've been hearing things. About Jared." Claire looked up. "What kind of things?" Cassandra from Belridge Investments mentioned seeing him at the Riverpoint Casino. "Not once. Multiple times. Last month alone. Not the poker room either. The high-limit floor." Claire's fingers tightened around her cup. Riverpoint wasn't where casual players went to pass the time. It was where people chasing something, relief, revenge, euphoria, went to lose everything. "He swore he'd stopped," Claire said quietly. Julia raised an eyebrow. "You believe that Claire didn't answer?" She didn't have to. That night, instead of preparing financial forecasts for the Jacobs family, Claire unlocked the antique filing cabinet in her home office. She pulled out a folder marked Estate Evelyn Whitmore, a collection of legal documents, emails, and handwritten notes she had kept meticulously since the day her grandmother named her as the primary beneficiary. Grandma Evelyn had always believed in records. Memory is fickle. Paper is honest, she once said, sliding Claire a binder of financial statements before her first college semester. So Claire kept records, copies of estate filings, balance sheets, investment distributions. She wasn't paranoid, she was prepared. But as she flipped through the documents that night, something didn't add up. Several account activity summaries showed minor discrepancies, balances that didn't match prior quarter statements, notes about external inquiry timestamps Claire didn't recognize. There were also subtle questions in recent emails from her parents, phrased innocently, but too specific. Her father had asked about tax implications of liquidating certain types of inherited stocks. Her mother, usually indifferent to the legal side of anything, had recently sent a link to an article titled "Why Equal Inheritance Among Siblings Matters More Than Ever." Claire stared at the screen. They weren't just interested, they were preparing. The next morning, she called Robert Geller, Grandma Evelyn's longtime estate attorney. His office was in an old brick building near Union Street, the kind that still smelled of varnish and leather-bound books. Robert was in his 70s now, sharp-eyed and unfailingly courteous. "Claire." He greeted her as she sat down, concern already in his voice. "I was actually about to call you." She paused. "Why, there have been inquiries from your father. He requested full copies of the estate's investment portfolio, including updated statements for the Ashford property. He told you I asked him to review them. Didn't he?" Robert gave a tight nod. "I didn't send anything." "Of course, but that wasn't all. There were also attempts, unsuccessful, fortunately, to access account portals using the secondary authentication code we set during Evelyn's final year." Claire's stomach dropped. "That code was only shared with me. And you." "I know," Robert said. "But someone tried. 3 times. From a device linked to your parents' home network." She exhaled slowly. "So they're trying to get in before distribution." "That's what it looks like." Robert opened a folder and slid it across the desk. Inside were printed logs of access attempts and email communications Claire hadn't seen before. There was also a brief note from the Ashford property manager, referencing a call from someone claiming to be a family representative asking for recent appraisals and sale procedures. "They're testing the water," Claire murmured. "And if they can't reach the assets directly," Robert added, "they may try to persuade you to move them voluntarily into something like a shared family trust." Claire's eyes narrowed. "Let me guess, they'd be the trustees." He nodded again. "It wouldn't be legally binding unless you agree. But you should be ready. If they think you'll give in out of guilt or duty, they'll push." Claire leaned back in her chair, her mind sharpening. Her parents were many things: prideful, manipulative, selectively sentimental. But they weren't foolish. If they'd waited this long, it meant they believed she could still be convinced. They didn't understand. That version of Claire, the one who went along to keep the peace, had disappeared the same night Grandma Evelyn whispered, "Protect what matters, even if no one thanks you for it." And she intended to honor that promise, silently, thoroughly, and without permission. By the time Claire pulled into her parents' driveway that Friday evening, the sky had already deepened into the dusky purple that always settled over Bellevue before a storm. The neighborhood was still, trimmed lawns, porch lights flickering on, and the Whitmore house sat quietly at the end of the cul-de-sac, its shutters freshly painted, its welcome mat perfectly aligned. It looked harmless, familiar, like a place frozen in time. But Claire knew better. She'd waited until this moment, early evening, bridge night. Her parents would be gone until 10, maybe later. She still had a key, a remnant from when they trusted her to watch the house during their winter trips to Florida. As she stepped inside, the faint scent of lemon polish and old books drifted in the air, as if her mother had just tidied. Claire moved through the hallways with practiced silence, avoiding the creaky third step, her pulse steady but alert. She wasn't here for confrontation. She was here for confirmation. Her father's home office was exactly as she remembered. Mahogany desk, brass lamp, bookshelves of law journals that hadn't been touched in years. She pulled open the desk drawer and found it immediately a manila folder labeled Family Trust Restructure Drafts. The label alone made her breath catch. Inside were documents, legal drafts from a firm she didn't recognize, not Robert Geller's. Proposals for a new family trust that would consolidate all assets from Grandma Evelyn's estate under joint control. With her parents named as sole trustees, Claire's name appeared only once, under the phrase anticipated beneficiary, contingent upon compliance. She kept flipping. A printout of the Ashford property's latest appraisal, a list of liquid assets held in investment accounts, a breakdown of the jewelry collection, inventory, estimated auction value, sale-ready condition notes in the margin. Then came the emails. Claire scrolled through them on her father's desktop. Careful not to open anything, she couldn't quietly backtrack. One thread, in particular, made her freeze. Subject line: urgent strategy for Saturday. Her mother's words. Typed with chilling certainty, Claire will resist at first. But once we explain Jared's situation, she'll come around. She always does. And her father's reply, curt and strategic. If she doesn't, we proceed with Plan B. The important thing is moving assets before Jared's creditors escalate. Plan B. Claire didn't need the details to know what that meant. Pressure, legal threats, maybe even attempting to challenge Evelyn's will on the basis of mental duress or undue influence. It wouldn't hold up in court, not with how meticulously Evelyn had prepared everything, but it would cost time, peace, money. They weren't trying to honor Evelyn's legacy, they were trying to dismantle it, brick by brick. She snapped quiet photos of the documents and emails with her phone, angles clean, timestamps visible. Then carefully returned everything exactly where she found it. No fingerprints, no sign of her visit. Only the quiet echo of a door gently closed behind her as she slipped back into the night. As she drove home through the winding hills above the lake, Claire replayed her mother's line, "She'll come around, she always does. Not this time, this time." Claire had already moved 3 steps ahead, and she wasn't coming around. She was circling back, with a plan of her own. By the time Claire reached her condo that night, the fury had faded into focus. Not the loud kind, not the kind that shouted or threw things. This was the quiet, surgical clarity of someone who'd spent her entire life watching people underestimate her, and was finally ready to show them why that had been their first mistake. She didn't sleep. She didn't need to. At 8:00 the next morning, Claire placed a call to Angela Price. Angela wasn't just a colleague. She was one of the most respected estate protection attorneys in Seattle. Sharp, discreet, and known for building legal structures even the most determined relatives couldn't tear down. Claire had met her at a financial planning symposium 2 years earlier. They'd only spoken professionally in passing, but Claire knew she was the one. Angela picked up on the third ring. "Angela, it's Claire Whitmore. I need to set up an irrevocable trust. Fast." There was a pause, and then a cool, steady voice on the line. "How fast are we talking? 3 days?" Angela didn't gasp or protest. She simply said, "Come in at noon." Claire arrived early. Angela's office was a sleek contrast to Robert Geller's old-world style. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over Elliott Bay. Clean lines, glass surfaces, no clutter, no pretense. They sat across from each other, 2 women fluent in control, and got to work. Claire laid it all out: the estate, the property, the jewelry, the emails, the trust drafts, the manipulation, the plan to move assets under the guise of family unity. Angela took notes without blinking. "So," she said when Claire finished, "your grandmother left you these assets through a valid will. Your parents are attempting to coerce you into forming a new trust that places control in their hands." Claire nodded. Angela leaned forward. "Then the strongest shield you can put in place is an irrevocable trust. You'll be both grantor and beneficiary. The assets will no longer be yours in the traditional sense, but they'll be protected from misuse. Even from you. Especially from them." Claire exhaled. That's what I want. No loopholes, no access. Not even for me, if it keeps them out. Angela's smile was slight, but it held weight. You're your grandmother's granddaughter. The next 72 hours blurred into motion. Claire worked side by side with Angela and Robert Geller, who immediately expedited the final stages of probate. Paperwork flew between offices, encrypted and authenticated, for the investment accounts. They created new institutional accounts under the trust's name, with strict distribution rules for the Ashford property. They filed a quitclaim deed transferring ownership directly to the trust. For the heirlooms, Claire inventoried every item in the safety deposit box and drafted a notarized transfer of physical assets. She moved like a tactician, checking and double-checking. Every signature another lock on a vault her family would never breach. Thursday night, just past 7 p.m., Claire sat in Angela's office, signing the final documents. The trust was complete. Her phone buzzed. A message from her mother. Why were you asking Martin about Jared's finances? We agreed to talk Saturday. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. Claire read the message once, then slid the phone across the table. Angela glanced at it, then nodded. They know, and they're nervous. Angela placed the final document in a black folder and pushed it toward her. Everything is secured. By this time tomorrow, the estate will no longer be touchable. Not by family meetings, not by guilt, not by court challenges. Claire signed her name one last time, when she left the building. Rain had begun to fall over the bay, soft at first, then steady. Claire walked to her car with nothing but her bag and the folder, her coat unbuttoned, her heart clear. They had planned to corner her on Saturday, but by then, the door would already be closed, locked, sealed, and she would be holding the key. Saturday came cloaked in the stillness Claire had expected. The kind of silence that descends just before a performance begins. Curtains drawn, audience breath held, every player assuming their role. She parked in front of the Whitmore house 5 minutes early. The shutters were freshly painted, the lawn perfectly trimmed. Presentation had always been her mother's armor. Jared's black Audi sat parked at an angle in the driveway. Expensive, unapologetic, the same way he'd always moved through life. Claire stepped out of the car, adjusted her coat, and took one long breath. In her bag was a single black folder containing certified trust documents, a signed deed to the Ashford property, and a statement of transfer from the investment accounts. Not weapons, just truth. Enough to shift the room. The door opened before she knocked. Elaine stood there with her signature smile, soft pink lipstick, pearl necklace, the gentle waft of Chanel No. 5. Claire, finally. Everyone's waiting. She was led into the living room, which had been arranged like a scene from memory. Her father sat in his leather chair, reading glasses perched low as he glanced at a folder in his lap. Jared slouched on the sofa, scrolling his phone, then tucking it away as she entered. He didn't stand, didn't speak, just smirked. Her mother motioned toward the love seat. Make yourself comfortable. Would you like tea or something stronger? Water's fine, Claire said, choosing the seat furthest from Jared. Elaine returned with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Claire noticed the silver tray already laid out with drinks, napkins, even lemon slices, like they were entertaining a guest, not staging an ambush. Thomas cleared his throat first. Claire, he began, his voice full of practiced gravitas. We've called this meeting because there are certain, pressing matters the family must address together. Elaine folded her hands. We've always believed in unity, especially during times of challenge. Families overcome together. We support one another. Claire said nothing. Her father continued. Your brother has encountered some financial setbacks, ones that could become dangerous if not resolved swiftly. And with your grandmother's estate finally nearing distribution, we see a path that can protect everyone. He slid a folder across the coffee table. Claire didn't touch it. It's a family trust, her mother explained smoothly, one that ensures Evelyn's assets are managed properly, for the good of all of us. Your father and I would serve as trustees. Naturally. Claire remained still. Thomas continued. We need your signature to finalize. Once it's done, we can begin using those resources to address Jared's situation. And what exactly is his situation? Claire asked. her voice calm but direct. Jared shifted, jaw tightening. It's not important. It's critical, Claire replied. Because what you're really asking is for me to surrender control of Evelyn's legacy to bail out my brother. Again. Elaine's voice dropped to a softer register. He's made mistakes, but he's your brother, and he's in danger. How much? Claire asked. Silence. Thomas hesitated. Over $400,000. Jared scoffed, rubbing his hands together. It's not like I wanted this. Claire. Things got out of control. And the plan, Claire said, was to liquidate Evelyn's investments, mortgage Ashford, and sell the heirlooms. Yes, her mother's eyes narrowed. It would still stay in the family. Claire reached into her bag, placed the black folder neatly on the table, and opened it. It won't, she said, voice steady, because as of yesterday, every asset from Evelyn's estate has been transferred into an irrevocable trust. I am both grantor and beneficiary. None of it is available to you. Not for this, not for anything. The room dropped into a stunned hush. Her father's face turned crimson. You did this behind our backs. Jared stood. You selfish. Do you know who I owe money to? You'd let them come after me? Claire looked him in the eye. You made those choices. I won't destroy what Grandma built just to protect you from the consequences of your own decisions. Elaine rose, tears welling, but Claire didn't move. You always do this. Jared spat. You pretend you're better than us, but you're just cold. Claire's voice never rose. No, Jared. I'm just done being the one who pays for everything. Emotionally, financially, quietly. Her father's voice shook with fury. We'll contest the trust. We'll challenge your authority. Claire met his gaze. You're welcome to try. But Grandma prepared for this, and so did I. And with that, she stood, dignified, unmoved, and walked toward the door. Behind her, voices rose, accusations, pleas, but none of them followed. They knew. The game had changed. And Claire wasn't playing by their rules anymore. Claire didn't remember falling asleep that night, only that she woke up on the couch, still fully dressed. The black folder from the meeting unopened beside her. Her head ached from the tension, but her hands, surprisingly, were still steady. She had done what needed to be done. And yet, the questions lingered, not about her decision, but about how far back the deception had really gone. Just after noon. Her phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was gravelly, uncertain. Claire. It's Raymond, your uncle. She sat upright. Uncle Raymond, her father's older brother. A name whispered with discomfort at family gatherings, used most often in phrases like, that's not how we do things. Don't be like Raymond. I heard what happened, he said. Robert Geller reached out. Said you might be ready to hear the rest. Claire didn't hesitate. When and where they met that evening at a small cafe tucked into a quiet corner of Madison Park. One of those places with worn wooden booths and a clock that ticked too loud. Raymond looked older than she remembered, his once jet-black hair now streaked with silver. But his eyes were unmistakably Whitmore. He studied her for a long moment before speaking. You look like Evelyn. She would have been proud of what you did. Claire said nothing. She just waited. Raymond sighed. You probably only know the edited version. That I left the family over a business disagreement. What they didn't say was that I walked away after they used me, just like they've used you. He pulled a folder from his coat, worn, edges frayed. Inside were copies of bank statements, emails, and property records, evidence he had gathered quietly over years. Your parents didn't just mismanage money, he said. They've been broke for nearly a decade. They refinanced the house twice. Liquidated retirement accounts, took out lines of credit in their own names, and in Evelyn's, without her knowing. Once. Claire felt her throat tighten. They started covering Jared's gambling debts when he was 24. First it was 5,000, then 20, then close to 200 by the time he hit 30. Each time. They said it was the last. Each time. They used another asset to plug the hole, and Evelyn never knew she suspected. But by then, she'd already shifted things into your name. She didn't trust them with it. You know that. Don't you? Claire nodded slowly. Raymond continued. Thomas never wanted to admit failure, not as a father, not as a provider. He saw your success as a challenge to his authority. And Elaine, well, she followed whatever narrative protected Jared. Claire stared at the documents, her mind weaving the pieces together. Their desperate push to create a family trust, the urgency, the emotion, the carefully scripted performance around the coffee table. They weren't just trying to help Jared, they were trying to save themselves. And if I hadn't said no, Claire asked quietly, they would have drained Evelyn's legacy, Raymond said. The Ashford house would be sold, the investments dismantled, the heirlooms auctioned off, and within a year, they'd be back at square one. Claire closed the folder. Why are you telling me all this now? Raymond met her eyes. Because you're the first person in this family in a long time who chose truth over comfort, boundaries over guilt. That deserves more than silence. He paused, then added, and because Evelyn asked me, before she passed, she said, if they come for Claire the way they came for me, don't let her stand alone. Claire looked out the cafe window, where the sky had turned a soft blue-gray. For the first time in days, she didn't feel alone. There was still more to face, more to untangle. But now she had the full picture, and she was ready for what came next. Claire scheduled the meeting for Sunday afternoon. No cryptic texts, no performative politeness. Just one simple message to each family member: we need to talk. My place. 3 p.m. Bring nothing but honesty. She wasn't asking, she was setting terms. The apartment was spotless, not out of vanity, but preparation. The living room was rearranged to make space around the large oak table. 2 chairs were placed across from hers. At either end sat Robert Geller and Angela Price, her legal anchors, calm, silent, watching. At exactly 3:07 p.m., the elevator dinged. Elaine entered first, still dressed like a woman hosting Sunday brunch, pastel scarf, light perfume, nervous smile. Thomas followed, jaw tight, briefcase in hand. Jared arrived last, alone, disheveled, trying to look casual in a hoodie that didn't hide the weight in his eyes. No one spoke as they took their seats. Claire broke the silence. This isn't a negotiation, it's a reckoning, and the rules are simple: we tell the truth, or we end the conversation. Her parents exchanged glances. Jared looked down. Let's start with the numbers, Claire continued. Jared, how much do you owe? He shifted, cleared his throat. About $450,000, Angela asked. He nodded, avoiding eye contact, give or take. Some of it's credit cards, some not. Claire kept her gaze steady. Define not. A beat passed. Then Jared muttered. Private lenders, guys who don't send polite reminders. They gave me until the end of the month. Elaine gasped, but didn't deny it. Claire turned to her parents. And your finances? Thomas adjusted his cufflinks, but said nothing. Elaine answered for both. We're behind on the mortgage. 2 lines of credit. We're carrying balances. Your father's practice hasn't recovered since the pandemic. We were counting on Evelyn's estate. Claire nodded, her voice calm. So what you asked for last weekend wasn't about Jared alone. It was about all of you. And your last safety net. Her father leaned forward. Claire, we didn't mean to hide anything, but we were trying to protect the family. Sometimes these conversations. No, Claire interrupted. You weren't protecting anyone. You were delaying consequences. You expected me to step in. Again. She looked to Robert and Angela, then back at her family. I'm not dismantling Evelyn's trust, not for debts, not for comfort, not for fear. Silence followed, thick, heavy, stunned. But Claire wasn't finished. That said, she continued, her tone shifting. I'm also not walking away. But if I help, it will be on terms that protect the legacy Evelyn left behind, and that hold every one of us accountable. She took a deep breath. Here's what's going to happen. Jared, you're entering treatment, residential, non-negotiable. I'll fund it, personally, not from the trust. He opened his mouth to protest, but stopped, then nodded. Claire turned to her parents. You'll downsize, sell the house, merge Dad's practice or restructure it. I'll help you map it out, with limits. No blank checks, no bailing. Elaine whispered. You'd really help us after all this. I'll help, Claire said, because I still believe in family. But help is not the same thing as rescuing, and it stops the moment manipulation starts again. Robert folded his hands. Angela made notes. Claire leaned back. This is the line. Not punishment, not revenge, just clarity. From here on, everything is conditional and earned. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Jared nodded again, slower this time. Okay, he said. I'll do it. Her mother wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. Her father looked away, jaw clenched. But he didn't argue. It wasn't a victory, but it was a beginning. The following week unfolded not with chaos, but with clarity. For the first time in years, Claire wasn't reacting. She was leading. Not from obligation, from intention. She began with Jared. Together, they reviewed options for residential treatment centers specializing in gambling addiction. Claire insisted on full-time inpatient care, a 90-day minimum, no halfway steps, no family visits until the second month. Jared didn't argue, not this time. There was a heaviness in his voice when he asked, "What if I don't make it through?" Claire looked him in the eye. "Then you'll try again. But this time, you'll do it without hiding." She covered the upfront cost with a personal check. Not from Evelyn's trust. Not from any shared account. This wasn't inheritance. This was investment. In healing. Not escape. Her next step was her parents. Claire scheduled a private planning session with them, laying out a financial recovery strategy. The language was precise. The tone measured. But the boundaries were absolute. Condition 1, sell the house. The Whitmore family home, once a symbol of stability, had become a financial sinkhole. 2 mortgages, property taxes in arrears, and maintenance costs they could no longer afford. Downsizing wasn't a suggestion, it was survival. Thomas resisted. "Of course, that house is our history. It's also your liability," Claire replied. "And it's time to stop living in a story that no longer exists." Condition 2, restructure the practice. Her father's law firm, once modestly successful, had stagnated in the last decade. Most of his longtime clients had shifted to younger firms. Claire helped him identify merger options. Partnerships with newer attorneys who needed seasoned guidance but brought digital systems and modern reach. The offer was there, but only if he accepted limited hours and let go of full control. He didn't like it, but he didn't reject it either. Condition 3, transparency. Claire laid it out plainly. "If I help, I get full visibility, budget reviews, debt logs. No hidden accounts, no more secrets." Elaine's voice cracked. "Claire, we're your parents, and I'm your daughter," she replied gently. "Not your insurer. For any debt that was legitimate, credit cards, tax penalties, medical bills." Claire offered structured assistance, not bailouts, not clean slates. She created a monthly plan with defined caps, tied to their commitment to financial counseling. The support wasn't unconditional, it was earned, and revocable. "I'm helping you rebuild," she told them. "Not erase." The final rule was the most important, and unspoken until that moment. "I won't carry emotional debt anymore," she said quietly. "If guilt, silence, or obligation is your currency, the account is closed." Elaine looked down. Thomas said nothing, but neither of them pushed back. And that silence, for once, was a kind of progress. Claire knew this wasn't a storybook solution. Addiction didn't vanish. Financial habits didn't reverse overnight. But what she had offered, what she had chosen, was help rooted in truth, not sacrifice. It was the first time she'd offered her family something without offering herself in pieces. And that changed everything. 6 months later, the Whitmore family looked nothing like the one that had once sat around a polished coffee table, trying to mask desperation with entitlement. Jared had completed his 90-day residential treatment, an experience he once described to Claire as the hardest thing I've ever done that didn't involve running away. He now lived in a quiet shared house on the edge of West Seattle, part of a transitional recovery program that enforced curfews, accountability, and full-time employment. He worked at a local garden center, modest, manual work that left his hands blistered but his mind steady. He called Claire once a week, not to ask for anything, just to check in. I'm not cured, he'd said during their last call. But I'm not hiding anymore either. And that, Claire thought, was something. Her parents had sold the Bellevue house 2 months after the meeting. The sale had been quiet. No dramatic declarations, no long goodbyes. Just a transfer of keys and a downsized condo near Capitol Hill. It was smaller, simpler. No more manicured lawns or extravagant furniture they couldn't afford. Just what they needed, and maybe, for the first time in decades, nothing more. Thomas had accepted a limited role in a younger law firm, of counsel, part-time, remote on Fridays. He didn't love the new dynamic, but he showed up. Elaine took a financial literacy course at Claire's suggestion. She completed it quietly, then sent Claire a photo of her certificate with no caption. It was the most sincere thing she'd shared in years. Claire hadn't returned to family dinners. Not yet, but she met them for lunch every few weeks. Public, short, and on her terms. The conversations were still strained, sometimes halting, but they were honest. No pretending things hadn't happened, no rewriting history, just people trying to talk without performance. The relationships weren't healed, but they were real, and that was enough. What surprised Claire most was how quiet the guilt had become. For most of her adult life, she'd carried a low hum of responsibility, an invisible weight of shoulds. She should have called more, should have offered more, should have tolerated more. Now, when those thoughts crept in, she met them with a different voice, her own. You helped, you didn't abandon, you just stopped bleeding to keep them warm. That clarity didn't come from victory, it came from finally, fully choosing herself without apology. She still spoke with Angela and Robert every month, keeping the trust in order, ensuring Evelyn's wishes were honored down to the smallest detail. The Ashford property remained untouched, preserved as intended. The investment portfolio continued to grow, funding the charitable foundation Evelyn had started. The heirlooms were catalogued, protected, never to be sold off in desperation. Everything Evelyn had built was safe now, not because Claire had fought for it once, but because she kept fighting for it quietly, every day, with structure and boundary. Julia said it best during one of their late-night calls. You didn't just protect Evelyn's legacy, she said. You rewrote your family's story. You broke the cycle. Claire smiled. No, I just stopped pretending it was my job to keep it spinning. And in that stillness, no drama, no declarations. Hope began to take root, not as a grand gesture, but as a life that finally, quietly, belonged to her. The autumn light at Ashford had a different hue, softer, somehow more forgiving. It spilled gently through the tall windows of the white colonial estate, bathing the worn hardwood floors in amber. Claire stood barefoot in the library, a mug of tea in her hands, wrapped in one of Evelyn's old wool shawls. The restoration was nearly complete. She had worked with historical preservationists, not decorators. Every molding, every window latch, every shelf was returned to its original design, not for nostalgia, but for respect. Claire didn't want to modernize what Evelyn had built. She wanted to protect it. The estate felt less like a house now, and more like a quiet witness to what had endured. That afternoon, while sorting through a stack of linen-bound recipe books in the desk drawer, Claire discovered a small wooden box. It wasn't locked, just tucked away as if waiting. Inside was the emerald necklace Evelyn had worn on holidays, wrapped in tissue that had yellowed with time, and beneath it, folded carefully in thirds, was a letter. Claire recognized the handwriting instantly. Delicate, slanted, Evelyn's. She unfolded the paper slowly, breath catching before she'd even read a word. My dearest Claire, if you're reading this, then you found the house, and you found your way. I want you to know, I didn't leave these things to you because you were the most successful, or the most perfect. I chose you because you understood. You saw the difference between wealth and value, between silence and strength. You knew when to give, and when to hold the line. They won't understand, at least not right away. And they may come for you with guilt and charm and reasons that sound like love. That's why I've made sure you have tools stronger than approval: clarity, ownership, and a right to say no. Stand firm, my girl, not out of pride, but because some people only grow when the easy option disappears. The real inheritance I leave you isn't the house, or the stocks, or the jewelry. It's the permission to be who you are, even when it makes others uncomfortable. And it's the reminder that dignity, once chosen, is untouchable. With all my love. Always. Evelyn. Claire sat down slowly, the paper trembling in her hands. It wasn't grief that rose in her chest. It was recognition. For years, she had wondered why Evelyn never pressured her the way others did, never asked her to step in, smooth over, carry what wasn't hers. Now she knew. Evelyn hadn't just seen her strength, she had trusted it. Claire placed the letter back in the box, then stood and walked toward the window. Outside, the leaves were beginning to fall, deep gold, rust red, soft brown. The seasons were shifting again. So was everything else. This house, this legacy, this quiet strength. It wasn't just about preservation, it was about permission, to build without fear, to give without erasure, to live without apology. Claire realized she wasn't just protecting Evelyn's inheritance, she was living it. It was early evening when the guests began to arrive. The table in the Ashford dining room, long, sturdy, made of oak Evelyn once said had outlasted 3 wars and 2 marriages, hadn't been set in years, but tonight, it held 7 place settings, white china, and linen napkins folded with care. Claire lit candles instead of overhead lights, allowing the room to glow in soft, flickering warmth. Julia arrived first, carrying a bottle of red and a knowing smile. "So," she whispered, setting it down. "We're doing this?" Claire nodded. "We are. Not because it's perfect, because it's possible." Next came Uncle Raymond, hands in his coat pockets, posture humble but open. Luke followed shortly after, fresh from a conference in Portland. His voice calm, eyes steady. They had spoken more often lately, friendship slowly rebuilding where silence once lived. Then came her parents. Elaine wore her pearls, but no lipstick. Thomas looked thinner, quieter. They greeted everyone with polite smiles, small nods, no grand overtures, just presence. Last was Jared. He stepped in with a covered dish and a nervous grin. "It's store-bought," he admitted. "But I heated it myself." There was laughter, not loud, but real. The meal began with hesitation. The conversation stayed on neutral ground at first: the weather, Julia's new client, a news article someone had read. No one spoke of the trust. No one tiptoed toward the past. But as dessert was cleared, something shifted. Jared told a story from group therapy, awkward, but brave. Claire's mother complimented the new chairs in the sunroom. Luke made a joke that made even Thomas smile, and for the first time, they weren't holding their breath waiting for the room to fracture. They were simply present. Claire looked around the table. No one was pretending anymore. No one was performing. Every person here had failed someone, and had chosen to show up anyway. That, she realized, was the inheritance Evelyn had hoped for all along. Not perfect reunions, but honest beginnings. She reached for her glass, raised it slowly. "To Evelyn," she said, "and to building something new, with open hands, clear eyes, and no more secrets." The clinking of glasses wasn't loud, but it echoed, deep, and enough. "I didn't save my family by giving them everything. I helped them by finally refusing to lose myself. And for the first time, we're rebuilding. On truth, not guilt. On respect, not silence. If you've ever had to choose self-worth over family approval, you know how hard that line is to draw. But sometimes, protecting your peace is the most loyal thing you can do." Let me know in the comments if this story resonates with you, and if you believe some legacies are meant to be honored, not shared. Don't forget to like and subscribe. There are more stories like this to come.